In your situation where you're, getting a few leads a day, where do you feel like you're most stuck? Is it in having those, sales conversations with those leads, or is it, are you tracking, how many calls you're making on a weekly basis as well?
Well, that's another thing with the KPIs and things like that. My brother and I had brought someone on board, but like I said, my brother even himself had to go back to a regular job. So he's, we weren't really doing that, like Pace was saying, being an organized person or an integrator like yourself. So all that stuff that needs to be done, I got to get better at it myself. Because
is Shamir, is he kind of more of an integrator personality a little bit?
He more than me, yeah, which okay. The bar is low, but yeah, he's kind of both. He did the test, and I think he was 50-50 basically.
So here's one thing that I would suggest doing, because one of the biggest things that I talk to investors and they're like, oh, I'm having trouble. I'm getting some leads, but I'm having trouble. It's actually keeping track of how many phone calls you're making on a daily basis. You will be surprised if you actually truly track how many you make. And that could be, a big game changer in the results that you're getting. I would have him, help you track them. Literally, don't make it complicated. Like, make it as easy as possible for you. Download an app like CallRail, for example. You can, track how many calls you've made on a phone number. And then at the end of each day that you're working Monday through Friday, making these calls, have Shamir help update just an Excel sheet, literally Excel sheet in Google Drive, calls made, contacts made. That's going to be a big thing for you to look at. And if you're not making at least 65 plus calls a day, Monday through Friday, that's the first indicator of, okay, that may be your issue more than having trouble converting sellers. Because if you make the right amount of calls consistently, deals just kind of start to happen. And I mean, Pace, I know you always tell the story of our sales guys last year where, it's like, oh, deals aren't happening. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, it was actually really interesting. It was when COVID happened. I get a text message from our sales manager at the time, and he's like, man, I'm having a mutiny with all the sales team. We're having a problem. Everybody thinks the world is ending. And I go, oh my gosh. So I jump in my Prius because I'm balling hard. I ball so hard, I drive a Prius. So I jump in my Prius, head down to the office, and I have a company meeting. And they're like, yeah, man, the news is saying this and the such and such. And that's why our contracts have stopped this week. And we're really slow the week before that. And COVID. And I'm like, okay, but what do the numbers say? And it came down to us opening up the KPIs. And we found out, because at the time, our sales guys' minimum amount of outreach. So this is very different than cold calling. Our guys weren't cold calling. They were just doing follow-up, right? So we were having our sales guys do 50 follow-up calls every single day as a minimum threshold. And literally, this is what they said. They come in and they go, well, the conversations have been so hard that's why we've slowed down. I was like, what are the numbers? Tell me the numbers. Where are we at? Show me the numbers. And their average phone calls per day, Matt, take a guess. How many phone calls were they making a day? Their average, they have to be at minimum 50. Where were they?
10, I don't know.
You're right. It was between 10 and 15 phone calls. They weren't even doing 20% of the work. And so what was happening is they'd have one or two bad phone calls on that. Somebody would bring up COVID. Like, what are you talking about? I'm not going to sell my house. COVID is going on. It's crazy. And it would demoralize the guys. And at the end of the day, this is a math equation, right? So for us, we told the guys it needs to be 50. Just get to 50. And I stayed on top of them every single day. And all of a sudden it was like, boom, boom, boom. Contract. Go back. We have another sales meeting. I go, guys, here we are. What was the thing? And they go, we weren't making the calls. We just weren't making calls. You're 100% right. It all came down to the numbers. It comes down to the numbers. That's it. And for you have 3 leads a day times 30 days, or not 30, probably 25. So you're generating 125 leads a month. You have enough leads. We just got to talk about how you follow up. What's a better follow-up process? And if somebody says, no, I'm not interested, do you follow up? The answer is typically 90% yes. And how do you follow up? And what do you say? What are the scripts? What's the guideline? What do you do there, right? So it's the same thing with you. Is you guys got to take an inside look at your follow-up and what are your daily phone calls and when are you guys doing it consistently? If you are doing it consistently, what is that number? Do you know the average amount of phone calls you're doing outreach on right now, Matt?
Yeah, no, that's the problem. Yeah, we did
So
it
Matt,
one time.
Cody, what would be the easiest way for him to track that?
Yeah, just
What you just
literally
said?
call rail,
Call
Excel
rail.
sheet, and
Yeah.
there's fancier ways to do it, but I don't
Sure.
like giving fancy ways because then it adds like confusion. But like if you can open an Excel sheet and type in at the top the date, calls made, contacts made, and then you just track. Then the next day you start, add the next date, and just do that. And then organize it a little bit better as you go, and just keep an eye on the consistency. Like I was telling like Pace, like my girlfriend Hael, she's been working for a couple other investors, working and basically running a lot of their operation over the last year, and she's going out on her own. I was telling her yesterday, she's like, well, what should I set my goal as, and this and that, and I'm like, just focus on the activity. If you just focus on the activity, the result happens. It's like getting excited about your body looking a certain way after going to the gym, when what you should just think about is, okay, I need to eat this many calories and go to the gym this many times. And if I do that, then that end result that I want is going to, eventually just happen. It's just easier to just focus on that day-to-day action. Obviously have your end vision of where you're wanting to go with the business, but if you just focus on the activity, everything else will work itself out.
I hate to say it, but there are little pieces of your business, I feel like, Matt, like if you don't know your average phone calls you're doing outreach on and your follow-up, that means there's probably other KPIs that we're missing that we got to really dial in for you. So write that one down. Cody, what's another thing that he should be tracking in order for him to get a little bit more in line of knowing where his numbers should be?
Yeah. So as far as your leads go, tracking how many leads you're getting a month. Obviously, it sounds like, you're getting a decent amount, every day, every week. But just tracking that over each month, because then you can start to, look backwards historically over, 30 days. In the last 30 days, I've gotten this amount of leads. And in the last 30 days of those leads that I've gotten, I've made this many phone calls. And based on that, I was able to get 1 contract or 2 contracts. And then you're able to start putting together, on average, it takes me, 370 phone calls before I actually get a contract, or maybe it's 500 phone calls or whatever that is. And then you can relate that back to the amount of leads you're getting too. And then you can have a little bit more certainty, because what I've found a lot of times, Matt, is when, people start talking about the market's getting, challenging, or it's, prices are, getting crazy and sellers are getting crazy. They're always crazy. They always want too much. And
yeah, has there ever been a time in the wholesale industry where all the wholesalers are like, damn, man, everything's easy right now?
Yeah, no, it's never.
These sellers are level-headed and they want the right number.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. So I think you'll have a lot more certainty when you're tracking some of that data a little bit more.
The goal for you, Matt and Shamir, do you guys have a monthly goal that you're shooting for? Is it 2 contracts a month? Is it 4 contracts a month?
Yeah, for sure. Well, 3.
Cody, how many leads do I need to generate to hit 3 contracts a month?
Average 150 leads a month. Just as like, if you don't have an average of what your business is already doing to get a contract, 50 leads per contract is a good starting point to be at. And then as you're working in your business over 3, 6, 9, 12 months, you can look back and see, okay, am I still, at that 50 leads per contract, or have I gotten better and now I'm at 40 leads per contract, maybe less. But that's a good starting point, and because it also becomes easy to get frustrated if you feel like you're working a lot, you're having a lot of hard conversations, but you don't feel like you're getting traction. And knowing kind of those numbers more will give a lot more clarity, just to like feel like, okay, well, I'm just not generating enough leads to get the amount of contracts that I want to get, or I'm not making the right amount of calls to get those amount of contracts. So you can kind of just bounce back and forth on that to know where you need to be.
Yeah, let's talk about that just real quick, Matt. Industry average for 1 contract is an average of 50 leads per contract. Okay. Now, when you start implementing creative finance, usually you get that lead. Ours is like 1 in 21 leads, we get a contract. Okay. but industry average is 1 in 50. So if I'm generating 150 leads a month, then that means I deserve 3 contracts, as long as I also hit the other industry average, which is 50 phone calls a day to those existing leads in follow-up, right? Because you're not cold calling, Matt. You've got to do all your follow-up. So you've got to have 50 leads per contract, and you've got to have 50 calls a day to achieve that number, right? In terms of follow-up. And okay, are you ready now? You said you weren't ready last week. Are you ready now? Are you ready now?
Right.
You know, those types of follow-up sequences. And
Yeah.
we could talk another day all about follow-up sequences. We don't literally say those words. There's different follow-up sequences we follow.
Yeah.
But 50 leads to a contract, it only happens when you actually do 50 calls a day of outreach. And at some point when you have a VA, your job, your entire job, Matt, right now should consist of only 3 hours worth of work every day at the bare minimum. So if you have a day job or you have other places to go, I would be time blocking every day. What 3 hours am I making my 50 calls, and focus on that, and then have Shamir deal with everything else. Everything else goes on him. You need to focus on talking to sellers, and you need to focus on every single part of your mind needs to be watching seller calls, studying sales scripts, how to overcome this objection, those types of things. That's where your primary focus should be. And then at that point, I'd say after 30 to 60 days, you now can know your numbers. You go, okay, well, we generated 130 leads, so definitely don't deserve 3 contracts, but I got 1 contract, and it's because I only made 27 calls on average every day. So I already know what I got to fix. It's not your VA. It's not your lead flow. The thing you got to fix right now is don't go get more leads, because you can't handle the 125 you got. You should have had 2 contracts, not 1.
Right.
Right. It's basic math. And I think a lot of people it's interesting how lost people get.